Picture this. It's the chaotic opening weeks of World War I, August 26, 1914. One British general makes a call that's going to define his entire legacy. He straight up defies a direct order from his commander and decides to turn and fight the full might of the advancing German army.
The result was this incredibly brutal, one-day battle that cost thousands of lives. So what was it? A disastrous act of insubordination? Or was it the one desperate gamble that saved an entire army from getting wiped out? That's the big question we're digging into here.
Now, to really get why he did it, you've got to understand the situation the British were in. And to put it mildly, it was catastrophic. This was the absolute height of what history now calls the Great Retreat.
So let's back up just 3 days. On August 23rd, the British Expeditionary Force, or the BEF, gets defeated at the Battle of Mons. Now they're in this frantic, headlong retreat with the German army basically snapping at their heels. By the morning of the 26th, after days of marching, a huge part of the army is just exhausted, they're divided, and they're walking right into a trap.
You know, the BEF wasn't even a single cohesive unit at this point. It was basically a house divided. You had General Smith-Dorrien's Second Corps, who were completely exhausted and pretty much cornered by the Germans. And then you had General Haig's I Corps, which had gotten separated and was just continuing its own retreat, leaving Second Corps dangerously exposed.
And this sense of panic, it was going all the way to the top. Haig, the commander of I Corps, was so shaken up by an earlier fight that his own chief of staff said he was mentally completely destroyed. This was the atmosphere of crisis and fear that was the backdrop for one of the most controversial decisions of the entire war.
And right at the center of all this chaos was one man, General Sir Horace Smith-Dorrien. With his troops in Second Corps totally exhausted and cornered, he was facing an impossible choice.
At 7 o'clock in the morning, a direct order comes down from the commander-in-chief himself, Sir John French, and the message couldn't be clearer. Keep retreating. Don't stop, don't you dare fight. Just get out. But Smith-Dorrien, he refused the order. He basically messaged headquarters that it was simply too late. His guys were already fighting the enemy. He wasn't choosing to fight, he was just accepting that a fight was happening, whether he liked it or not. His decision was to turn and face the enemy head-on.
So this wasn't some reckless charge for glory. Not at all. It was a calculated risk born from pure, absolute desperation. His cavalry commander told him his men and horses were almost finished. The German army was just too close to outrun. Smith-Dorrien truly believed that if they tried to retreat for another day, his entire corps would just fall apart into chaos. His only real option, as he saw it, was to strike the enemy hard and then, hopefully, try to slip away in the confusion.
And so the battle began. But this wasn't the kind of fighting they'd seen just a few days earlier at Mons. No, this was a new, horrifying kind of industrial warfare. See, while Mons had been a rifleman's battle, famous for the incredible accuracy of the British infantry, Le Cateau was an artillery duel. The whole day was just dominated by the devastating power of these modern, quick-firing German guns, raining shrapnel down on exposed troops. The British made a fatal tactical error right from the start. They put their artillery incredibly close to their own infantry, sometimes just 50 meters behind them, so the German guns firing from way back in concealed positions could aim for the British infantry and, without even trying, just devastate the exposed British artillery sitting right behind them. For the men on the ground, any strategic goal of a delaying action just went out the window. It became a desperate fight for survival. Orders were coming down the line. There will now be no retirement. For the soldiers in the thick of it, this was a fight to the death. For hours, the British lines somehow held under this immense pressure, but by midday, it was starting to shatter. It really looked like the whole gamble was about to fail, catastrophically.
The breaking point was coming, and it was coming fast. With both the right and left flanks starting to give way, a complete encirclement and the total destruction of I Corps seemed just moments away.
And then, just when all seemed lost, a lifeline appeared. The French Cavalry Corps under General Sir arrived on the scene. They moved in to protect that collapsing British left flank, creating just enough of a shield for Smith-Dorrien's men to finally break away and escape. Let's be really clear, without that French intervention, this story would have had a very different and much darker ending. The British had escaped, but the price of Smith-Dorrien's decision was absolutely staggering. And the debate over whether it was worth it, well, that started almost immediately. This was the cost.
7,812. That's the number of British casualties, killed, wounded, or captured in a single day of fighting. Out of the 40,000 men who stood their ground, nearly 1 in 5 became a casualty.
I mean, the losses were just immense. The number of men taken prisoner, 2,600, is just staggering, and 38 of their precious artillery guns had to be abandoned on the field. By any immediate measure, it looked like a complete and utter disaster.
And yeah, the initial verdicts reflected that sense of disaster. The BF's own commander, Sir John French, heavily criticized Smith-Dorrien for his choice. The Germans, thinking they'd shattered the British force, called it one of the most glorious days of the war. But over time, a very different perspective has emerged among historians, one that sees the battle as a crucial, if incredibly bloody, victory.
So, why the change in perspective? Well, it's because while it was a tactical nightmare, the battle was actually a strategic success. That defiant stand, however costly, completely stunned the Germans, and it seriously slowed down their pursuit. It bought the rest of the British Army precious time. After Le Cateau, the BEF was able to continue its retreat without being seriously harassed again, which allowed it to survive and fight another day. Which brings us right back to our central question. The stand at Le Cateau was brutal, and the losses were horrific. There's no denying that. But without one general's willingness to defy orders and risk everything, it's very, very possible the British Expeditionary Force might not have survived the opening month of the war at all.